Hello everybody, my name is Oliver G. This is the Eiffel Tower, and today's episode you're going to hear me chatting with the author Edward Chisholm, talking about his new book, which is called Murder in Paris 68. I'm reading it now. It's excellent, just like his other book, Waiter in Paris. He was on the show talking about that then. And for this interview, we sat down by the Seine River on the, where would it be? I guess it's the Ile de la Cité. Yes, the Ile de la Cité. And had a really lovely chat in the afternoon sun. So we experimented here, and we sort of filmed it from a distance, including from across the river, a few different shots. So if the video works out nicely, you'll see that on YouTube soon. Otherwise, we'll share clips of it on the internet, on all the social medias. But Edward Chisholm, talking about his book Murder in Paris 68, and the main character of that book is the French actor Alain Delon. So call it tenuous if you will, but for this episode of the alphabet season of Paris and France, D is for Delon. Meet Edward and hear the fascinating story of how this book came to be. Hope you enjoy it. Let's start with some music. Edward Chisholm, how you doing, man?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. Back in Paris.
Last time we were at Beaufanger, the restaurant, talking about Waiter in Paris.
It was cold. It was autumn. We were eating well.
Now
we are baking on the banks of the Seine, below the mythical 36 Quai d'Orfèvres, 36 Quai d'Orfèvres.
There'll be people saying, what on earth is that?
Exactly. They'd be right to. They probably don't know about it. But it is the mythical institution that was formerly the head of the Paris police for all criminal investigations. Gangs, drugs, murders, the works. It all happened here and featured in cinema in 1947, the film of the same name, Quai d'Orfèvres.
Cinema is going to be something we're going to talk a lot about today. We're going to talk about Paris in the 60s. We're going to talk about your new book, Murder in Paris 68. But I also want to go off on tangents. I want to talk about the Nouvelle Vague, the new wave French films, which I'm sure a lot of people are yet to discover. I feel personally I haven't dipped my toe in deep enough. Is that, like, let's start here. How did you find out you were seemingly obsessed with this part of history?
Well, first of all, how have you got your carte de séjour and not watched any Nouvelle Vague films?
I snuck in the back door or something like that.
So for me, I can't remember when it started. I do remember watching Breathless, Au bout de souffle, and just being like blown away by the sheer energy of the film. And it was completely unlike anything I'd seen before. Jean-Paul Belmondo, of course, playing this sort of small-time crook and hustling around Paris and stuff. But just the way it was filmed was something completely unique. But what I think it captured, and this goes back to sort of what we'll talk about, or maybe start talking about now, is France at this period, so we're talking end of 1950s through to the 1960s, is a period of immense change, especially as a youth movement. And the Nouvelle Vague was a youth movement. It was cinema against what they were calling the cinema de papa, so the cinema of the grandparents, their parents' generation. So it wasn't about being formal, it was about breaking conventions, it was about doing things on the cheap, it was about creating things with other means you had. And these are things I could kind of relate to, especially in my 20s. And I just love that idea that suddenly, especially I think for anybody in France who was young in the 50s and 60s, they were seeing themselves on screen. Cinema was everywhere, and it wasn't just everywhere in the sense that Paris had the most screens in the world and still does to this day, but it was actually, they were filming in places you were hanging out in, the places where you were playing flipper, the whatever it's called, what is it called?
Pinball.
Pinball, exactly. Playing pinball, you're in cafes playing pinball, smoking, flirting, these kind of things. So for once, your life became cinematic. You could see yourself as a protagonist in a film, and that's what I kind of loved, and it's one of the themes of the book.
It strikes me that a lot of times when you got movements like this, maybe people don't even realize it's happening until afterwards. But it seems in this case that people were very much aware. Was this just cinema, or was this everything? And was this everything was changing?
So I think the term Nouvelle Vague was actually coined for a more general youth movement, but it got applied to these sort of 6 or 7 directors who were part of the Quai de Cinema magazine, which is like a critical film magazine, who all went on to become like directors. And yeah, I think although like lots of film buffs will debate when it started and when it finished, there was this awareness at the time that they were doing something, and it was a movement. The nouvelle vague means the new wave, like this new wave of people who are going to come and wash away everything else before it. And it must have been amazing to be part of that. I think that's very rare.
Do you think we're having one now in any sense, or are we living in a boring time?
Oof. I mean, you have to believe that this is all still happening. I think today we live in such a fractured, fragmented society, and people are doing stuff on YouTube, and if you want to get really into any subject, you can find the people doing it. But at the time, and that's why it was so different, I think, is that cinema was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was an explosion. It wasn't just like an form of entertainment. It was political. It was a way of expressing yourself. So, the nouvelle vague changed society as a whole.
I want to get into Alain Delon, and I want to get into your fabulous new book. But first, I got a few things I want to run by you. You started with a waiter in Paris, which I loved. I said it from the beginning. Big fan. A contemporary writer in Paris who's doing cool things. Love it. Love what you're doing. Love that the second book you do isn't another kind of memoir book set in today. We go back to the 60s. And it made me think, is your third book going to be like Spaceship in Paris set in 100 years kind of thing? Or like, you're not meant to ask an author with a new book what their next book's going to be, but is this, are you the man that reinvents himself?
It's true. You sound like my editor asking me what the next book is. So whilst I was doing this book, I swore to myself I would never do another book set in Paris, or not for a while. But there is something about the Paris trilogy which has a ring to it. The first book obviously explored the world of restaurants and gastronomy and food and this sort of working underclass of the city.
What was the restaurant it was set in?
If I told you, I'd have to kill you, but for legal reasons we can say it's shut down now.
I'll ask after.
Yeah, ask me after another beer. And the second one obviously deals with the world of cinema, the world of crime as well, and a little bit the world of politics. So the logical third one would be perhaps space race, perhaps as you're saying, or maybe fashion or something in this world in a different period. But I'm quite tempted. I need a break because the work required to research this book predominantly was overwhelming, and now I need to step back from narrative non-fiction, and do something perhaps in the fiction realm.
How much do we talk about your private life on this podcast?
It's the first time I've been asked that question. Well, go for it.
You don't live in Paris, right?
I don't live in Paris, no. So I lived in Paris for 7 years. Now I live in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, which is a 3-hour and 40-minute train ride away. So I was able to do a lot of my research here. I mean, I'm back regularly because as much as I was happy to leave, I'm always very happy to return.
What about what I wanted to talk about when I started reading the book? I think the first page you talk about that is the Police Archives Museum.
Yeah.
Not many people know about that place even existing, right?
Yeah, this is.
So you spent most of your 20s in there? Is that what you wrote?
Yeah. So in my 20s, I was doing like freelance writing work whilst doing this sort of array of menial jobs. And the free places you could work at the libraries, Paris has, as you know, and you've done many great podcasts on them. There's incredible libraries in Paris, but there are also these much lesser known ones. And there's this one that I loved called the, how do you translate it? The Library of Police Literature in the 5th on Cardinal Lemon. It's actually not too far from where Hemingway lived when he was in Paris, if you want to sort of add another literary angle in. And unlike all of the other Parisian libraries, which are often in these magnificent reading rooms with leather upholstered chairs and there's nice green reading lights that make you feel like you're at an Oxbridge college, this is in this sort of a squat concrete bunker. It's very small. It's got like harsh overhead lighting. But what it is, it's the most incredible place because I think it's Europe's biggest collection of books related to crime, espionage, true crime. You got everything from, what different poisons do to the body, to assassination attempts, to true investigations, newspaper cuttings, and all this kind of stuff. So for someone like me who was always just looking, as a writer, you're always looking for stories that you sort of put in your back pocket and you'll maybe use later, it was incredible. And I'd come across this story and the books about this. It's called the Marković affair, what became known as the Marković affair, named after the person who had been killed, Stevan Marković, or executed, it turns out. And I first came across it in this library, some newspaper cuttings, about Alain Delon's bodyguard or best friend. The language would always change. Had been found murdered and dumped outside of Versailles in October 1968. I thought it was a Delon film I hadn't seen, because to read through it sounded like a film.
So you'd already watched Delon films and stuff before this?
Yeah, I was slightly obsessed with Delon. In fact, when I'd moved to Paris, I remember walking out of a showing of Le Samurai, which is one of his sort of iconic films. He plays this mute assassin, and in fact, he created the archetype of the mute assassin. Ever since, this character has always sort of harked back to what Delon did. If you've seen the film Drive with Ryan Gosling, for example, he hardly says anything. The screenwriter, when he was writing this, Hossamini, he said, like, if he was ever stuck with a scene, he'd go back to the Samurai and work out how they did it. So Delon really becomes a sort of the guiding light when it comes to the silent assassin, which is, the irony is not lost on me, because when I was in the police archives reading his interviews with the police, and he's being accused of potentially killing his friend, he says very little. He speaks like his characters. And so there's this world of fact and fiction blurred. So having watched a lot of Delon films, because of just youthful obsession, I thought he was incredibly cool and charming and had a hint of danger about him, and was one of the most beautiful men in the world at his peak. To then suddenly find him at the centre of a true crime story in which he is accused of killing his best friend was quite mind-boggling. And from there, the obsession began.
That brings us to Delon. D is for Delon. I'm going to be honest with you, Edward. Before I started reading your book, I didn't really know essentially anything about this guy, and I know that's embarrassing. But that means for sure there are other people out there around the world who aren't experts. You seem to be a little borderline obsessed, maybe in love with this guy.
Most definitely. Yeah.
Paint the picture. Let's introduce us to him first.
Yeah, so Alain Delon, for those who don't know, he was one of France's biggest film stars. And I think it's important today to understand he wasn't just a film star in the sense we understand it today. He was beyond that. He was a cultural phenomenon. He was huge. There was a joke about Brigitte Bardot and Renault cars being the biggest exports of France. Alain Delon's up there. He was this image of aspiration for a lot of young men. He was a sign of the changing times. He was dangerous. He wasn't just an actor. He was a man who surrounded himself with dangerous company. If you wanted to try and give, I guess, American examples of who Delon was, he had the kind of the cool of Steve McQueen, the kind of dark side of Marlon Brando, and the associations with the mob of someone like Sinatra. He was the real deal. He wasn't pretending to be people. And he said this often. He said, I don't act. I'm not my characters. I don't act my characters. I am my characters. And so that was always a fascinating point of reference to me as I was going through the archives. I spent a long time with Delon, me shadowing Delon, like Stevan Marković, who was his shadow, trying to understand the man who was the real man behind the mask. And he's hard to get to understand. He's a wounded, damaged dark star that seemed to consume everything around him. The New Yorker, he died in 2024, described him at his prime as the most beautiful man in the world. He could be charming, but he could also be insufferable and a bully as well. So he's not necessarily a person you would want to be friends with, I don't think, but you would like to be in his orbit.
I talked to some French people to get their perspective on this guy before we started talking, and the consensus I felt was people respected the heck out of his professional life and his private life. Apparently he wasn't so great with his kids. This whole Marković affair we're going to talk about, obviously it's some kind of a big stain on his life, which we see a lot, separating the man from the art, especially in Paris. Picasso, Hemingway, these kind of guys. Did you struggle with that, like writing a whole book about this guy? Did you find you liked him by the end of it?
Like isn't a word you use with Delon. I think he's somebody I admired greatly. He was somebody who spoke frankly, said what was on his mind. I think these are rare qualities today. He's somebody who, regardless of what the sort of common consensus on things was, he would just say what he thought. You know, to his credit, he would speak about homosexuality at a time when it was outlawed. He would insist on hiring a communist director when he was blacklisted. He would do a film about the Algerian War when, you know, most of the censors wouldn't let any of this stuff go through. He was a man of conviction in that sense. In terms of how did I write about him, the problem is that older Delon is problematic, and I think that's where a lot of the, you know, he was fraternizing with a lot of right-wing political characters.
Do you mean when he got older or
older? He got older. But my focus was on young Delon, because for me I don't think the old man can tell me anything about the young man. The young man can tell you about the old man, but I was interested to see how a man like this put himself together, how he constructed himself, because he wasn't just an icon. Again, he was an icon, but he was something much greater. And so how does that happen? How did you become that? And that's what I wanted to know.
Is there an equivalent to him today?
I don't think so. And it's been a discussion, because there's discussions about turning it into a film or a TV series, and the big question is like, who would play him? And it's hard because he had this sense of menace and woundedness, but this incredible beauty as well.
Reminds me a little bit of the concept of James Bond. Fair?
Yeah, I mean, he had a bit of that. But the actual real James Bond that you read in, for example, the first books, and this is a man who was an alcoholic and had seen and done bad things and struggled with it. Yeah, he's very much that one. Not the sort of polished Roger Moore one.
No, definitely not a Roger Moore Bond, but like the concept, rather than one of those actors that played Bond, but the concept of him and all his troubles, which is maybe why they struggled to make the new Bond pick the new actor.
And and Delon had signed up to fight in Indochina. So this is sort of pre-Vietnam War. As he was still a minor, so his parents had to sign a waiver. He was 17, and he went to war at 17 for 3 years. He wasn't enlisted; he chose to go. I found out during my research he spent a third of his time in the army, in the prison, in the military prisons and stuff, for various things. He was always in trouble with the police and the authorities. But for him, he was above this kind of stuff. These are the concerns of ordinary people. Delon is above this.
And this was one of the kind of eureka moments in the book. So the book is you're writing. It's sort of, I mean, you'll say this much better than I. I'm sure you've practiced it more, but you've written the story of how you researched it and what you found, and how you found some of his the army archives of what he did and when he was in prison and so on. So it's like you telling the story of researching the story while telling the story of his life as an actor and his life as a person with the Marković affair, right? What's the beautiful way of saying what I just said?
Well, I haven't done too many interviews because the book's just come out. But
hey, wasn't this your first interview in mainland France?
This is my first mainland European interview.
That's the way it should be, Edward. Thank you.
Exactly. Breaking news. How to say it best? Yeah, I mean, I wanted to use the Marković affair to explore Paris of the 50s and 60s. So it's a true story. It's an unsolved murder that went on for 7 years. It was something that became so toxic it almost brought down the government. And this isn't a joke. The Fifth Republic almost crumbled because of the reverberations from this affair. And so for me, it was to do a number of things. I wanted to explore fame and identity and Delon and cinema through the prism of the relationship that he had with Marković. So what was the relationship at the core of this story that led to the demise of one of them? So there are lots of Tom Ripley associations.
I was just going to say the same thing.
The talented Mr. Ripley looms large in the story. Delon's first breakout role was playing Tom Ripley. When Marković was found by the police, he was wearing Delon's clothes.
Which is a part of Talented Mr. Ripley.
Talented Mr. Ripley assumes the identity of him and stuff. So Marković kind of assumed Delon's identity. He was sleeping with his wife, etc.
And you as a writer, you're finding this stuff and you're going, this is gold. Here we are.
Yeah. At times I emailed my editor at one point being like, there's so many plot twists that he's going to think I've made it up, and the story's going to lose credibility. But yeah, so it expands. It goes from this world of cinema and Delon and the outsider's story who comes to France in 1958 and travels through 50s and 60s France right to the top, the glamorous end, the Delon side. But also then you've got the criminal world, the underworld. I wanted to know how the Vice Squad work. We're sitting below Quai d'Orfèvres, 36 Quai d'Orfèvres, which is where they operated out of, mythic location. And I was like, who are they? They were called the Brigade Mondaine. So that this Vice Squad, essentially, what was their job? And so in the book, I switch points of views in order to look at the whole of France. So yes, with Delon sometimes, but sometimes with like a detective. So how was his day? And it was a huge amount of research. I was eventually given access to the classified archives, which is still classified because it was such a huge affair. And there's 5 tons of material in this.
Hang on, how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine like French bureaucracy plus classified documents is a pretty hard thing. It took me a long time. I had to knock on a lot of doors, get a lot of rejection, get given a lot of convoluted responses about things being digitized or not actually existing or missing, that kind of stuff. But eventually I just, persisted, slightly inflated my international renown as a British author who, was spreading the word of all things French. And eventually I was given access. And I did ask an archivist, because I'd have to go to this special room in the archives, and I would sit, and someone would sit on a higher desk, overlooking me, watching me for the 9 hours I was there.
Like a lifeguard or something?
Yeah, literally like a lifeguard, just me, to make sure I didn't steal anything, to take any photographs or anything.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's also sensitive. And I said, why did it take so long? And she said, because it had to go very high in order to get validated. I don't think Macron signed off on it, but I think somebody quite high in the Interior Ministry did. That was sort of the nature of the story.
Wow. So this brings us into the Marković affair. This is a Serbian guy, right?
Yes.
Serbian?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yugoslavian at the
Yugoslavian, okay, fair enough. This is what the whole book is about. I mean, we said that the part is about Delon and Paris, but it all comes down to this guy. As this boat passes, I'm wondering if the people at home can hear the sounds of the Seine, and I hope they can. But tell me about this guy, and why do we care about him?
So Stevan Marković is really fascinating for me because it's by following Marković's story that we can explore, we can travel through France and Paris of the 50s and 60s. He claims political asylum in France in 1958 by sneaking in over the border. He's a small-time criminal, hustler, really good at counting cards, a bit of a womanizer. He'd been a professional wrestler at school. And initially he just dosses around the south of France, getting kicked out of casinos once they realize what he's doing, getting involved in a bit of crime here and there, taking photos of tourists, trying to womanize, sleep with people at the beach and stuff.
As in taking photos of tourists for money?
For money, yeah. So the Polaroid just been invented.
Not voyeuristic like our video we're doing now from across the Seine.
Although voyeurism and photography comes into it later, because later rumours after his death, because there were many reasons given for why he was executed, not killed. And one of the reasons, on the rumours that was spreading around Paris, was that he had been organising orgies and taking photos and then blackmailing the members who were there. These were orgies for the elite. And one of the most scurrilous rumours, and one that almost brought down the government, was that it was Georges Pompidou's wife, in an embrace with two blonde women, and that it was essentially suggests that something was rotten in the States, the core of the States, and all these people were at these parties doing whatever, and hence why he had many enemies.
Once again, as you're figuring all this out, because this, I mean, how much did the world know about this whole affair and the murder and everything?
At the time?
No, now. And at the time too. Was it internationally known?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it went international. It was a 7-year investigation. It was on the front page of all newspapers around the world, especially in France and Italy, the UK. It involved the FBI and stuff as well as Interpol. So I was reading through all their transcripts. It was a huge, huge affair. It was one of the biggest scandals, one of the first big scandals that mixed together cinema, celebrity, and politics, and in spies. And I spoke to former spies. I spoke to former detectives and stuff. Today, I think a young person probably doesn't know so much about it. A person of a certain age in France most likely would. If you're in England, it's the equivalent would be like the Profumo scandal or something like that.
What about Australia?
I will edit this in afterwards and I'll say something really intelligent.
I get a question. When I've asked this to other people, there's the police sirens, which in the early days when I did this podcast, you could hear police in the background. I always wanted to edit it out, and then I get emails from people. I felt like I was back on my honeymoon and
But
whatever.
It's one of the things I love about Paris. I always know when I'm back. It's like the sirens sound different, the tap water tastes different, the smells from the vents of the metro smell different.
I was going to ask you, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all, but I like to ask people sometimes when you go deep on something, you've drank very deeply from this topic, and I can only assume if you're anything like me, you probably tell your close ones, I found this. And it borders on obsession, and it becomes maybe dangerous. Did you have skate too close to that, or did you find yourself getting drawn in too deeply, or how did you feel about that? Did people tell you to shut up at some point?
Yeah, my poor girlfriend. I mean, my sort of study area in our apartment turned into this weird shrine of Alain. I mean, if he was still alive and the police came around, they probably thought I was organising a hit or something. It's like, you know what I mean? I didn't have the red thread.
I was going to say, did you have pins?
No, not quite there, but I had a lot. I mean, I had gone too far, and it did kind of break me because there was so many, rabbits I could chase down holes. Before I'd finished the manuscript, it was twice as long as the book is now, because there was just, everything was fascinating to me, and I had so much information. I knew the number plate on the car the guy was driving, and what colour roll neck, and what type of cigarettes. For a writer to have this much detail was incredible. But yeah, it became obsessional. I had to remind myself I wasn't trying to solve the case, obviously, because it was impossible to solve. I mean, if Interpol and the French government had failed, well, they quashed it.
Who's Edward Chisholm?
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to? I mean, I do say at the end of the book what I think happened. I think it's the most logical answer. But yeah, it was. It became completely obsessional, and its story is about obsession, because Stevan Marković became Delon's shadow, essentially. He was his stand-in on film sets where they would set the lights up to see where the shadow would fall. So he became his shadow. He followed him around. And I became, in essence, like the shadow's shadow. And I was trying to follow Marković to get close to Delon. And I remember at one point, it was a freezing morning. I was standing outside Delon's old house in Paris and just picturing myself there, imagining everything. And I'd seen the recreations by the police and stuff, photos from the period. And I just thought to myself, oh God, you've got... And I was buzzing the door trying to get someone to... And I was like, this is going a bit far. I was dreaming about it. And yeah, and I'm happy it's... Well, apart from talking about it, I'm happy now the research thing's finished, because it could have gone on forever.
No, I love that you did it, because firstly I'm enjoying the book a lot, but also it's this isn't a half-assed effort here, and it really shows, and it's so exciting when people pour themselves into a topic like this and you see what comes from it. It's cool. So good for you for doing it. Thank you for doing it. I want to bring us now to Paris in the 60s. Let's finish on this idea. Paris in the 60s. I mean, you weren't here for the 60s, neither was I, but you've gone into it. Does this evoke something? Do you feel like you wish you were here in the 60s? You think it was better to now? What's your vibe on that?
I mean, I'm always a bit wary of nostalgia. I don't think it's the right way to look at things. But, and so when I set out on writing this book, I knew I hadn't been in the 50s and 60s, but I needed to know what it smelt like, what it looked like, what it felt like. I had to speak to a lot of people who had lived there at the time, and read a lot of books, watch a lot of films, watch documentaries, go into the audio archives of the French state and listen to news reports. And already from the beginning for me, 1960s, end of the 60s, the premise was this was the last time for me that Paris really was the cultural centre of the world. 19th century was clear cut. It's Paris, the centre of the world. Yes, through First World War up until 1945, but 1960s, 50s, 60s, new wave, changes cinema, changes the world, fashion magazines, etc. It was a place where things were changing, things were moving, anything was possible. You could be a young person on the make, as we said at the beginning, and I think it must have been so exciting to be at that time. We're also, and I said it here in Quai d'Orfèvres, there were the May uprisings. It was started as a student uprising and became a complete national strike. The whole country shut down. And reading about what it was like to live in Paris at that time, not just stuff that I found really interesting, like how would they go about building a barricade, but also just the rationing that took place. Orly Airport had just been opened, and initially there were planes coming in every 3 minutes. Suddenly there was no air traffic across Paris. There were no fuel. There were people using candles. So you'd gone to this strange bubble where the youth were literally dictating the terms to the government. And it was a time when I think to be young, it felt like you could change things. I mean, the age of these people, I had to remind myself when I was reading through the police documents. Delon is 30 or something. In their early 30s, the stuff is happening that I'm reading about as well. It comes from before in their 20s. And you're like, wow, they've done all this at this point. It must have been an incredible time. I'd love to go back there and wander around for a bit.
Perfect, because that leads so perfectly into my final question. You're allowed a time transporter back to Delon's Paris. Whatever year you choose, his world, you're allowed to be there as a shadow or a shadow of a shadow. Where do you want to be? It can be a street, it can be a cinema, anything. What do you want to check out and experience? No promises you get to meet the man.
Yeah, I mean, so where would I go? This has just come to me now, fortunately. But I'd probably go to Chez Regine. So Chez Regine was the world's first nightclub, disco. It was the first disco. It was the first place in the world. And again, a good example of Paris leading the charge here, in which the band had been replaced by what would now be called a DJ. So somebody playing records. And it was the first place where music was played from vinyl, and so it could be much quicker. You could change tempos, you could change genre. And as Regine herself said, and the book takes place in Saint-Tropez, Megève, and Paris, but she said before Regine the night was dark. And I think that's so good. I mean, so I'd go there and hang out with, the gangsters and the film stars, and ideally bump into Delon and befriend him and get a ride in his 250 California Spider across Paris.
Perfect answer, Edward Chisholm. That can wind up our chat. I think everybody, do yourself a favor, get out there, get a copy of Murder in Paris 68. If you're in the States, and a lot of listeners will be,
It's
out in November of 2026. Although, can they not order it from Europe and get it sent over?
You can, yeah. It's also out in Canada in June. I'm off to Toronto next weekend. But it's, November, annoyingly. But yeah, befriend somebody, pay Oliver a small
large
handling fee, and I'm sure he can sort it out.
Yeah, find the book, guys. You're going to love it. If you loved Waiter in Paris, you'll love this. Say again? Oh, yeah, the film, which we did a pod. We've done this, our third pod, I realised, because we talked about that.
Briefly, yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to shoot on.
No, that's okay. Your Waiter in Paris becoming a film, filming in, when was that again?
October, yeah.
How exciting is that, by the way? I love that when your new book comes out, the movie talk is starting for your first book.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I wish I could have controlled that. But no, all the announcements of the casting, so Leo Woodle and Clémence Poésy as the leads. And then it was down in Cannes as well at the film festival. Everyone's apparently a very hot topic, hot project. So it's filming in October in your neighbourhood of Paris.
Whereabouts is it exactly being filmed?
Well, it's around the Bastille and the Gare de Lyon. They're going to use this as the kind of locus of the film.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I think I said this last time we talked, but I'm weirdly proud of you, Edward. Keep doing. I don't know if I have any right to be proud of anyone, but it's cool to have young people doing cool things, especially when it's related to Paris. So keep up the good work, and I'm excited to see what comes next. And best of luck with Murder in Paris. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, Edward Chisholm, a friend of the show. I think that's the third time he's been on this show. And his new book is great. I'm halfway through it, really enjoying it. And I think if you liked Waiter in Paris, you'll like this book as well. I'll put a link to where you can find it in the show notes. Otherwise, I'll also put a link to something Edward posted about some of the best Alain Delon films, so you can check them out too. And of course, all the things we talked about will be in the show notes. Another episode coming from me on Friday. This episode comes out on Monday, as always. And if you enjoy the show, become a member on Patreon or Substack, where essentially you pay a small fee every month and get a world of bonuses in return. Otherwise, check out our walking tours. Let us show you Paris. The reviews have been nothing short of exceptional. And, well, why go anywhere else? theeiffeltower.com/tours will show you the Marais, Montmartre, or the Latin Quarter. Maybe even elsewhere. Send a message. We can make things happen. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Edward for being on the show. And see you soon with another new episode. Au revoir.